Our air quality numbers, it's
Unhealthy.
yeah.
Even
It
with
was
the
over
rain.
200 this morning when I got.
Huh.
The rain was washed off. One would think, maybe it would be worse.
Oh, and they were saying that the rain was actually pulling it.
It's in the dangerous area when it's about to.
Okay.
The scales.
Okay.
So,
All the Canada and Minnesota fires, huh?
I guess.
We got her. Yep. Only look at the natural resources.
Oh. Ah, is everybody organized?
No Duke this morning?
He was online, but we lost him.
Well, it's 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna call to order the Land Use and Information Committee meeting for June 3rd, 2025. Notice is posted in accordance with Wisconsin statute 19.84 open meeting law. And at this time is the period for public comments. If there's anyone here wishing to address an issue not already on the agenda. And I think everyone I see here is here for agenda items, so we'll proceed to an approval of the agenda order. Motion to approve the agenda order by Supervisor Anderson, second by Supervisor Szymanski. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No one. Motion is in order for approval of the minutes from the May 6th, 2025.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Supervisor Blumberg to approve the minutes, second by Supervisor Lacqua Anderson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Supervisor Tucker's back. Opposed, none. Moving on to the public hearing. So Jason, do you want to read the publication?
Yep. Notice of public hearing, State of Wisconsin, County of Burnett, Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. at the Burnett County Government Center in room 165, Town of Menan, Severn, Wisconsin, regarding the following. Burnett County Land Use Shoreline Protection Ordinances. Number 1, conditional use permit, CUP 2510, Denazo. Public notice hereby given to all persons, Town of Webb Lake, Burnett County, Wisconsin, that Dustin Denazo has made an application for a conditional use permit per the terms of the Burnett County Land Use and Shoreline Protection Code of Ordinances to operate a home occupation business of a stump grinding tree service located on the parcel with tax ID 26411 in the RR1 zoning district, CSM volume 3, page 9, and the parcels described in document number 233286 and document number 360814 being located in Government Lot 3, Section 33, Town 41 North, Range 14 West. Number 2, map amendment MAP 25 Schuneman to rezone the parcel with address 20050 State Road 87, tax ID 695, being the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter, Section 36, Town 37 North, Range 19 West. Located in the town of Anderson from A exclusive agricultural to RR3 residential recreation zoning district, zoning change requested by.
Okay. So the conditional use permit QP 2510. Is Zano here present or online?
Online. Because he's trying to work the microphone. Can you unmute yourself, Dustin?
think we can call him because we can't put him on speakerphone. You could always go to the next one and then come back to this one in 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, let's just amend the agenda to proceed on the next public hearing, and if we can get him connected.
Does he know how to unmute? Cause not everybody knows.
Well, I asked him to unmute. Can you hear us, Dustin? We can't call you, we don't have a phone in here. Or conference phone.
It's the star something to unmute.
Is it *6?
Hey gang, this is Dustin. I think I got it unmuted. Sorry about that.
No, no worries. You're good. We can proceed.
All right.
We just called your request, so would you just discuss with us what you want to do?
Okay, so I don't know if I'm talking too loud or too quietly, so bear with me, gang.
You're good. You're good.
Essentially, I own about 135 acres off of County Road H there. I have a sign that I wanted to essentially advertise for a stump grinding tree service business that I don't do full-time, I do it part-time. My full-time job is I'm a paramedic on the local ambulances. And I want to just kind of alliterate that there's going to be no buildings built. There's going to be no garages, no construction, nothing like that. It's just essentially for me to advertise a sign for my business on the property that I own. I know I noted in my paperwork as well, I have the land that I do have is sectioned off into 5 different parcels. So in a roundabout way, I am my own neighbor. So I'm kind of cleared from that. The sign itself doesn't block any houses. It's not big. It's not gaudy. I mean, I tried to make it look representable. But that's all that I am essentially trying to do with this permit.
Okay. Question I have, where do you house the equipment or the stump grinder and truck and whatnot?
I would park the stump grinder on that parcel that it's on. The parcel is connected to my driveway. So, and it's a very small, I mean, it's a 10-foot trailer, so it's not big.
No, reason I was asking just is that sort of houses quote marks around the word, the business, and it's adjacent to your house, and contiguous. So I think that qualifies it as a home occupation type of thing then. So
I would just kind of following what I was guided to do, I guess, with this. I don't, I don't do the stump grinding at my house. I go to other people's properties to do the job.
no, that's why it's a home, a business that's operating from your home, but it obviously you don't bring the stumps home to grind. So we're good with that.
Okay.
It would have very little effect on any neighbor regardless, because you have no noise or commotion for what you do at the premises. So I think just to make it fit the criteria for the county's ordinance, and you could have an on-premise sign that way, that's what you're after. Any questions by any other rest of the committee? Okay, hearing none, Dustin, I'm gonna open the public hearing and see if anyone is here to testify regarding that. And then we'll proceed. After that, if we have any further questions, we'll ask you then. So
Okay, thank you.
at this point, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here for this particular agenda item? And seeing none, I will close the public hearing and open this up to the committee for any comments or discussion.
Looks pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned.
The question I have is, so is the conditional use to the property, or, I mean, because conditional uses generally go with the property, but is this attached to the business? Because essentially the ordinance is just that the sign needs to be where the business is.
Yep.
I just don't want to open the door to basically, billboard signage I'm
No,
trying
he
to
has,
think-
well, he has to advertise for this business, so it couldn't all of a sudden be changed to, Pepsi or something, on a billboard. The
Right.
sign couldn't
It's-
change to an
It's
off.
specific to the request
Yeah.
that we approve.
Yep.
So,
Okay, so it's specifically for the stump grinding, and so, but the application, and I'm just trying to find, I mean,
He has 5 parcels, they're not connected, but they're all adjoining, he owns multiple parcels, so it's one of the parcels he owns that's next to his whole homestead area.
right, I think
Essentially.
the point would be the sign on where his house is would be invisible.
Yeah, because his house is like a quarter mile off the road.
So he wants to have the sign where the, where it can be, and because of the nature of the sign regulations, home occupation sign needs to be somehow connected to the property. So
No, I-
it's- it starts that.
I agree with that. I'm just wondering if there's anything we can put in there that, like if he were to like move the business or sell the property, that he can't continue to,
Yeah, the sign it couldn't be changed to something else.
not change, but it's like he couldn't keep the sign there if his business was no longer there or.
Correct.
Right, but that already exists, because it needs to be part of the home occupation,
Yeah.
home property.
Yeah.
That is containing the home occupation. There's, for whatever it's worth, there's a ancient attorney general's opinion that a parcel for regulatory purposes can consist of multiple parcels. Combined parcels, and that's kind of what we're doing here, not following that necessarily. So, yeah. But it has to remain in that status to be compliant.
Looks on a picture, at least like it's like a mobile sign kind of. Doesn't look like it's dug into the ground or anything. So is there any? Can you move it from parcel to parcel? Where does that stay in that spot?
We're specific to this one.
It's gonna be specific to that spot, and I think that's his only spot that on his parcel that has county road frontage mainly, so. I don't think anywhere, like Craig said, anywhere else on his property, the sign would do no good.
Yeah.
No one will see it, so.
If he wanted to pull it out to refurbish it or because, tree hits it or something and put it back, fine, but that's,
I mean, it's gotta meet the setbacks like any other sign does and all that stuff, so.
Yeah. so.
Are there any size requirements on home occupation business signs?
Yep, I wanna say, is it 36, don't quote me, 36 square feet maybe? I'd have to pull up the ordinance real quick,
32, 4x8.
or 32 maybe, yeah.
And is that each side or?
Oh, yeah, you could, that's.
Yeah, it could be double faced, the sides gotta be parallel, back to back, is what the ordinance says for that language.
So we'd be covered, in our thing that we always say, cover all.
All other regulations,
Ordinances.
applicable regulations.
Yep.
Yeah, signage is a section of the zoning ordinance, and we won't go into why that happened. We don't have time for that today.
As it currently is he conforming to the regulation with the sign as far as the size?
I didn't get to that point because I was trying to get him so he could have a sign on his property, but I can look here real quick. So let's see, on premise, freestanding, non-residential, 32 square feet, yep. So 8x4 on each side, back to back, yep.
So he's okay?
Yeah, cause I think it's less than that right now, or that size right now, one or the other.
Okay, any further discussion? Dustin, do you have any further comments?
Yeah, I have one, Chairman.
Oh, Duke.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Duke.
Yeah, sometimes I think we get into these discussions and I really wonder if we don't need to look at our sign ordinances as well. We've got an individual that owns properties trying to make extra income. I mean, it helps him pay his property taxes. To me, it gets down to more property rights type things. He's not trying to have a sign for another business or to gain income through having the sign itself. I don't even think you should have to have a permit. I'd like to see us have a resolution in the future to make these things permittable when someone has a business on their own property. But that's my comments. I'm in support of the sign.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Cup 2510 with the There are two staff recommendations. Follow all sign regulations and follow all local, county, state, and federal requirements for this activity.
Second that.
Motion by Supervisor Blumberg, seconded by Supervisor Aqua Anderson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Supervisor Tucker,
Yes.
Supervisor Moyer,
Yes.
Supervisor Szymanski. Yes. Supervisor Blumberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Chuck Anderson,
Yes.
Supervisor Carol Aqua Anderson,
Yes.
Supervisor Conrad, yes. So motion's carried. Your business is in business, Dustin.
Thank you guys for the time.
On to the next matter is rezone request map 2503. Schuneman, rezoning A to RR3. You're present, could you come forward?
Sure.
With a microphone, just identify yourself for the record and it's pretty straightforward, but just run it by us what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm Vaughn Schoeneman. Looking to get a variance on the RR3.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. I gotta get caught up. Here I am. You've got frontage on the Trade River, looks like.
Yes, 18 acres and farm too.
No, and it's just then you're gonna do a 3-lot subdivision, is the plan?
Yeah, I was, well, I had thought about just splitting 18 and a half. And when I talked to the surveyor, he said, well, you could go 3 lots. So, I'm thinking that route.
No, that makes sense, and we don't need, it really doesn't make that much difference how you do it, but just to get it on the record, that's what your plans are.
Yep. And I didn't know if I needed to know that right now at this time. So
No.
that's why I'm just
You can,
bringing it forward.
once we rezone it, you can do it however you want to
Okay.
within RR3.
Okay.
So I think this is again pretty straightforward. Any other questions by the committee on this at this time? Okay, well, we'll go back and take a seat. We'll open the public hearing
Okay.
and see if anyone else has a comment.
All right.
Yeah, at this time, I'll open the public hearing on rezoning request 2503. Anyone here wish to speak to that? So far, no one is speaking to it, so I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the committee for any further discussion.
You have two pieces of correspondence. One was in your packet from the town of Anderson saying they are okay with the request. And then, I forwarded an email to you yesterday from Hallie at DOT saying, I don't think the DOT has any issues with it as well.
Right, they just need them to apply for a revision to the connection of
Yep.
the highway.
Yep.
Again, and you're aware of that too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just access to a state highway. It's nice if there isn't any complication. Sometimes there is.
Yeah.
So that. We gotta think, approve it, recognizing that it's subject to that approval by DOT, but that's that's the only element about that. Any further discussion, anyone? And at this point, we'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve map 2503.
And that motion would be to send it on to county board.
Yes.
Yes, a recommendation to approve by county board.
And then that would include the staff recommendation, the typical boilerplate, follow all, thus and such.
Right, because the state requirement for the driveway would be included in that.
Follow all local, county, state, and federal requirements.
That's your motion by
Yes.
Supervisor Szymanski. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Blumberg. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Supervisor Tucker,
Yes.
Supervisor Moyer,
Yes.
Supervisor Szymanski,
Yes.
Supervisor Blumberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Chuck Anderson,
Yes.
Supervisor Terry Wonka Anderson,
Yes.
Supervisor Conroy, yes. Motion's carried. We will be sending it to county board. It's a recommendation. The county board will then amend the ordinance to change the zoning district for that purpose. And you don't have to come to that.
I'll go to that meeting on your behalf, and then I'll send you a letter afterwards saying it's approved,
Okay,
so.
sounds great. Thank you.
You're all done. Okay. Now on to the text amendments and land use ordinance, various items. So we again made some changes. We got some opinion from Stephanie regarding a couple of things too. So Jason, you wanna pass through it?
Yeah, so now we're on to the color gray, signifies this month's changes, it's gonna be
You ran out of colors.
quite the color chart here, so if I go and look for that color here. Yes. Page 8. I added, since we're talking about solar, and we talked about solar roof shingles and how we wanted to make those exempt from permitting. Added a definition of solar panel and solar roof shingle. So solar roof shingles are exempt from needing land use permit, it says that language there. And then we go to page 11. This is in the RR1, 2, and 3 districts. Line 26 added the language for personal use for that ag use. Line 29 added for personal use as well. I added the maximum of, because that's the same, that's the same word formatting in like the A2 district, so it's the language is all exactly the same.
Well, not for personal use, then they can't sell their rigs.
No, I would not think so, because do we care about that really? But the point is, I'm talking to Larry, the County of Packey about this, that people do that kind of thing. But it's that you can't be creating a functional business level of ag district in a use in a non-ag district without getting into a potential conflict with the livestock siting law, because it could be, are you circumventing the law, you know, and not allowing commercial farming? So it seems convoluted, but I trust his opinion on how these things get interpreted in court, you know? So, no, I don't think we care, and we don't think we care if somebody's raising a couple of beef cattle or something for their kids to share with them and that kind of thing. That's still personal use. I don't think it just means only you can eat the eggs that you use, right?
I don't see an issue with the person having the, egg stand outside now.
Just
Cause it's a couple dozen eggs
Yeah.
they're selling. I mean, you're not gonna make a living selling a couple
Right.
dozen eggs a
I
day.
think you nailed it. I
Yes,
think you nailed it from Larry's point of view. It's not, a volume is not rising to the level of commercial activity.
yeah.
You know, you're not, if you're raising, let's say a couple of steers, you aren't gonna make any money raising them probably. It's just that you'll have better ones than you get in the grocery store, right? That's the thinking. Or you didn't have to buy it all at once or whatever, you know. So I think that's, as long as it's personal use just means not commercial. I think that's the way we gotta interpret that.
Excuse me, Greg, was there an animal unit cap on that?
5 animal units. Again, as we went deeper into this, we were talking about a low density district allowing higher numbers. And Larry would rather we didn't use animal units at all, but we have to have some way to measure. You know, what's personal use? Are we gonna argue that 2 steers are personal use, but 3 are not? 5 would, more than 5 probably, 20 for sure, right? But that's the knife edge of trying to accommodate people's desires to do these things without creating a conflict in our regulations pertaining to large agriculture. That's where we're at.
So somebody with said chickens could have a few customers. As I was growing up, there was a lady who lived out in the town of Anderson, I think, or maybe Grantsburg, one or the other. She and her husband would come to town on Friday afternoon. She'd bring eggs to our house. We were customers. The pasture next door, they would get some eggs from her as well. It probably went grocery shopping, whatever. That would be okay according to this.
I think, again, it's in the eye of the beholder to a point, but.
I don't even know how we would know about that happening, to tell you the truth.
No,
If if someone's delivering to somebody's house, she doesn't have a sign out
and
there.
if you've got a dozen hens, you might for a while have a surplus of eggs, you know, and you want to find a home for them, right?
Right.
That's perfectly reasonable, but at the same time, you know, if you were in an A2 district, you don't care, right? Doesn't matter. And so what we're kind of trying to do is allow some of that stuff without having to be in an A district. You know, somebody at some point has way too many chickens and goes commercial, we have to deal with it. But I think the odds are so low that we'd ever deal with it.
Yeah, like in this case, this wasn't a matter, she wasn't advertising or
No,
whatever,
and
she was just
again, even though,
neighborly, friendly.
yeah, and she wasn't making a living on that either.
No.
So that's the bottom line difference, I think.
Because I think the point of what you guys are trying to do with this is give people the option to be kind of self-sustaining in residential, not having to be in a full-blown egg district, so.
Right,
I think if we kind of think
and not to.
a small amount is pretty self-sustaining.
And we're trying to make it permitted so that we don't have to do a conditional use that we approve every single time.
Mm-hmm,
Why would we need to do it when it's so commonly approved?
yeah.
So. I think that we're being more generous than a lot of places in the state are, but. We've done that before, so.
And if there's a problem going forward, we make an amendment to the ordinance.
To find somehow we created a problem, which I don't think we will, but if we find we did, we can deal with it. But, you know, err on the side of being generous than
Yeah, I like the idea of cutting people slack as much as we can.
let people do what we always approve them doing, pretty much. Anyway, okay, carry on.
Page 12, we changed, line 12, changed that was 20 animal units, now it's 10. So this is the CUP portion, and then added the word for personal use.
Are you going to be taking comments from the public or questions throughout?
Sure, anytime you want to make one,
Jeff had a question.
go ahead.
When you count chickens, how do you count them? Like if, for instance, if a guy has 6 or 8 egg-laying chickens, but you also make enough for your family and you buy 30 to your butcher, you're only gonna have them for 8 weeks.
There's a chart that's what says what portion a chicken is of an animal unit, and I think it isn't it like 100 or 200 chickens is like one animal unit.
Way more chickens.
It's hundreds of chickens.
Yeah, and you,
I heard you guys talking about, well, maybe 20 is too many, but.
Well, that's animal units though, so like one steer is considered an animal unit.
right, right.
So think about how many chickens equals one beef cow.
And one thing we should mention about animal units,
You got 5 cows and 10 layers of.
You got a lot of stuff to get to 10 animal units.
right,
So basically, you're saying it's all right for us to just have without getting all this.
right.
That's the point of this, is try to
We're
get on.
trying to make a cap that if we have somebody really exceeding it, we have a number. But almost nobody would want to do that unless they were really in agriculture, right? And the other place it comes in, by the way, is people who have horses. And the 10 animal units sounds like a lot, doesn't take long. Five horses is about 10 animal units. Right, because their manure volume is pretty stout, right?
18 with change.
Right? Like, that's too expensive.
Frank, this is Jeff Falstrom. He is on the Town of Grantsburg Comprehensive Planning.
Okay, good. Yeah, we should kind of have you identify yourself for the record. Thanks, Ramona.
Yeah.
Because we are doing a public hearing, but we're doing it pretty casually. Okay,
So, getting back to this 10 animal units, how many chickens would it take to come up to 10 animal units?
It depends on what kind of chicken it is even.
Yeah, I can pull up the chart here.
okay. Maybe a few.
Before you. And remember, we're not talking about ducks or peacocks or
When
whatever.
we get into where we talk just in general animal units, you could have some, but those numbers are different. Ducks are higher than chickens, I think. Because they need a lot of water.
So if you go with layers, it's 0.01. So what, that would be 100 chickens is one animal unit.
Yeah.
So you could have 1,000 chickens would be 10 animal units.
Should be.
That's more than personal use, I think. You have 1,000 chickens,
See, that's,
Unless you had a really big family.
I guess.
yeah, that is why Larry recommended adding that personal use, because that's the preemption of the loophole for something that is clearly a commercial operation and it should be an ag. Now, if you want to have 1,000 chickens, you need to be an A2 or A5 or A or something. But not in an RR district. That's the point.
Yeah, so it's not quite as restrictive as it sounds on the surface.
Or as generous either. If you say, well, I can have 1,000 chickens. No, you can't, because can't convince us that's personal use now, right? So, but a reasonable number, we're not gonna be counting chickens, no. I don't think so.
I think, all right, we're on page, let's see, we just talked about 12. Page 12. Page 13. Line 24, added that language, a maximum of, to make it consistent with the other wording and for personal use. And then, so on that same page, lines 37, 38, 39, and then 1 and 2 on the next, then remove that language. Because it's essentially permitted uses. So then there's a couple of renumbering of paragraphs on page 14 there. And then skipping this stuff where like solar and that stuff, because we'll talk about that. I'm kind of figuring after we look at that solar memo and the junk memo, so I'm kind of looking at stuff except for those. Because I have those notes in there in blue that say need guidance from Corp Council. I had this done last week, so then we got those memos after that. 33. Okay. Yeah, so this is in the forestry district. We had nothing in there in forestry for allowing some animal units. So on page 33, lines 1 and 2, I added that. And I put the same 10 animal units to mimic the other districts. So you'll see my note there. Do we want to add this to F1 district? They have more than 10 acres and want to have more than 10, then they should rezone, kind of how we thought. If you're over 10 acres and you want more than 10, rezone to A2 then. And then you don't have a cap.
Yeah, I think this is. Remember, there was a little, with farmland preservation, forestry and then acres had been rolled in.
Yep.
Even though there really wasn't forestry accommodation, so this kind of cleans that up too.
Yep. And then line 32 there. Same thing on parcel. So if I have a forestry parcel under 10 acres in size, then it would be a maximum of 10 units for personal use with a CUP. So it's mimicking the other districts.
Yeah, or non-conforming
Yep.
parcel.
And then page 34, we added lines 22, 23, kind of the same thing, so F2, which is the big parcel size forestry. Put in there again, the same 10 animal units for personal use. So my note was, do you want to add this? I'm assuming you do. So then if they're over 10, they can rezone to A2.
It's being consistent.
Yep, trying to make it fix similar to all of ours. So then took out on page 35, then took out that section or lines 12 through 13, 14. Cause again, they should rezone if they are a large parcel and wanna be more than 10 animal units. And then had to renumber that paragraph on line 15. Might be all of them,
That's it.
other than the solar and the salvage stuff. Which I don't know if we wanna have Stephanie sit up here when we start chatting about her memos and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah,
So might as well put her on the hot seat, bring her up front.
Bring it up there.
There's a chair right there next to me, or even here, you can sit next to me. Come and join the fun on this side.
You can call you people over here.
Yeah.
You'd have to call me Duchess.
Alright, so the only things we gotta talk about yet are the solar and the salvage yard stuff for the ordinance changes. You should have two memos, one about solar energy and then one about the salvage junk memos, so I don't know if you guys have questions or want us to make some comments. I
Which
don't
one are
know.
we gonna look at first?
Let's do solar first. It should be in your packet, no, let's see, that was separate emails,
yeah,
cause they were after the, yeah, were after the packet.
Email masters.
Yeah, so it should be a Thursday email on the solar one. Solar permits.
yeah, there it is, solar permits.
I'm assuming you don't want us to read the memo word for word.
But everyone read it already? Well, just the question that comes to my mind, and it's a clarification, is that what we've been trying to do is permit them within the guidelines of what we're allowed to permit, but we may be, do you think we're a little over regulating, or are we safe?
Over-regulating, under-regulating is hard to answer, but I would say, the aim of regulation needs to be as minimally restrictive as possible. But there are certainly valid concerns for regulating, you know. We want to make sure that solar panels aren't being placed in a floodplain or in where they're destroying the shoreland. Unless, I don't know, maybe you can have some shade grasses that would grow under the solar panels. But so protecting the community health and safety in that respect, I think is I know it's absolutely valid and something we can do. But it also has to be analyzed on an individual basis. So to say that any solar panel under certain size is automatically permitted without any sort of review kind of makes it harder to review the larger panels. proportionally larger, not the 100 kilowatt systems and things like that, but the slightly larger personal systems.
But my thinking, my thoughts kind of are, like with our permitting process for other accessory structures, I would assure that they're not tight to the right of way where they might be an obstruction of vision for an intersection or something.
Right, right.
Too high on a top of a structure that gets up into the blocking of the sky for the next door neighbor type of thing. That's in the statute. I think that can be done just with a land use permit for the small ones, but it's a review and a minimal fee for an accessory structure, right? And then with the ones that may be like similar to the Webley project we did approve. In the public hearing on that one, there were concerns raised by the adjoiners. And then the applicant addressed those concerns and amended the plan to move what were the components, that made noise, buzzing.
Inverters, right?
Inverters, yeah. Farther away from the property line, that kind of thing. And so, to my mind, the process worked there. We knew we couldn't deny it, and then we knew that it was, in a commercial, though, Northwest Electric. But was that 2.5 kilowatts? It was small.
Megawatts.
Megawatts.
No, megawatts are like
Isn't it 100 megawatts?
100 megawatts is the
PSC
PSC.
regulates. Yeah, so this might have been 2.5, 2.5 megawatts.
megawatts. It could be. The point was, it was a pretty commercial volume, but still really pretty low. And the CUP, would have, I think, been in order on that for public interest, but it never did happen, for obvious. But anyway, so it seems like that focus with some clarification of what the purpose of the regulations are would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think so. And perhaps some language that to the effect of permits will be granted whenever possible. Something, but that if we can, we're gonna approve everything we possibly can.
I'm gonna paraphrase you and say that we would only deny for cause.
Yep. I like that better.
Otherwise, you expect to get that permit
Mhm.
unless there's cause in the public health, safety and welfare realm to deny it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I've talked too much. It's a microphone, isn't it? But any comments? Go ahead, Ramona.
Since you're making these changes for future, anything that's existing, because solar has not ever been in your code of ordinances, will that be grandfathered in? Because based on the state statute, you need to have this in ordinance form. As I read it, and according to the memo, if you didn't have that prior and it was nowhere listed in any of your ordinances, that's regulating after the fact, because there's several solars that are in the county that may have reviewed your code of ordinances based on state statute and would now be penalized with the idea that they thought they were in the right. And so shouldn't those be grandfathered in?
Well, good question, and not what I can answer, but I believe we've granted permits as people as an accessory without defining it in solar.
But it's not been in your definition, but it's not been in your ordinance.
No, I know, but in the case of general zoning, there's lots of, a structure is anything with form, shape and utility.
But that's not a structure.
A structure, well, no, a solar panel is a structure, it has form, shape and utility.
It's not in your definition as such.
Yeah, it's a definition of accessory structure.
No,
It doesn't list the word solar,
correct.
but it lists things like such as, and then it has a whole laundry list.
When you compare it to, the state statute 66.0401. It indicates that it can be minimally regulated and by ordinance. And so if it's not in your code of ordinance and it's not specified anywhere in there, the previous solar up to this date.
But the question you're arguing is, does it have to be defined as a solar structure specifically or not? And that I don't know that, but I know it was a structure, right? It's the same, you can have a solar panel, or you could have let's say a gazebo that is about the same size, right?
It's actually a system.
But you don't specify a gazebo, you just say a structure.
The gazebo would be a structure, solar would be a system. It's a functioning system.
I think that's an individual discussion for a specific site. No, I don't think we can, I don't care either way, frankly. But the point is, I think we've been attempting to regulate them as an accessory structure. And now we're trying to correct that and make sure we're specific, not so much on the individual small homeowner type, but on the future of larger semi-commercial types. Now, right now in the state, it has to be a utility or a co-op to build one, but there's discussion to, provide for like a community doing its own, right? And those sort of things are the things that I think, want to get on top of and be accurate about. I think the incidence of individual people having, panels on the roof that we didn't need to regulate, or freestanding panels that we should have, because one's a structure and one's not, in addition to this, it's addition to the roof of the house, that's two different things. So, but I don't think I'm prepared to make any decision on any individual request. That can be negotiated, or we can come up with an agreement on that specific to.
I think what he's asking is that, are we gonna go back to all these people that have already done this? And then say, hey, now we need permits.
Well,
What about the ones that have already paid for a permit then?
yeah,
Should we give them their money back?
we, right, that's the
Either way, you got half the people are gonna be unhappy. Why did I pay for a permit 5 years ago if you're telling me I didn't need one?
Right,
No.
because we said, well, that is a structure that we regulate structures, right?
Yep.
The statutory guidance is more, the zoning was always unfortunately reactive instead of proactive on this stuff. When we finally comes to light that we need to correct it, now we're doing that. But Jason's right, we have had people that probably should have got a permit and didn't, maybe we don't know about it. We got people who came in and asked for permits and we gave some permits. So it is what it is.
But you're saying we're correcting it now.
Well, no, but
It shouldn't be.
no, no.
You should
When
be
you discover your language is flawed, you correct it. And you have to amend sometimes where the statutes have changed and now we're inconsistent with the statutes. So we amend. That doesn't mean everything we did in the past is wrong. It means we're trying to make ourselves as compliant as we can. Okay? So that's the way I would interpret that. And, again, we can, in general, I think we would like to see people that should have got a permit, get a permit after the fact. And we can do that without any penalty. If we want, that's our decision. When we do something, when you knew you needed the permit for that deck and you built it anyway, we double fee you. But when something that there's a legitimate argument, if I thought it was okay, we can deal with that.
But by state statute, they are.
Yeah, they've been encouraged, right? But it doesn't mean they weren't regulated. And how we regulated them, there's no malintent to regulate them punitively. We just were saying, we believe you need a permit for a structure, and we considered it a structure. That if it came down to it, that would be a decision for a judge to make, is were we right or were we wrong? I would rather see us not do that and just come up with a solution, right? So anyway, but I think that's all I have to say about that. Does anybody have anything to add? I talk too much, you know.
No, at least if they know that they have to now. It's like for term rentals or whatever, now they know they have to going forward.
Right, and I'd be-
Without a penalty.
Right, I'd be fine with anybody that we feel should have had a permit and didn't, just, okay, here's your permit, no penalty, just that's it.
Yep.
But beyond that, I don't think we were wrong for attempting to regulate in the public interest in the past, even though the definition may have been flawed, okay?
I just don't think all definitions can be completely encompassing. And so, I mean, I think if the interpretation was a structure, I mean, are you gonna list dog house of a certain size, tree house? I mean, so it's
And that's
it
like
has
you
more.
say, Euclidean zoning basically says if it's not listed, it's illegal. That's the
In the very.
literal definition.
No one can do what it says you could do, which is one of the reasons we do conditional uses, so we can cover things that are unanticipated. But again, that completely liberal, strictest interpretation, the last thing we want to say is no, you can't have solar panels because it will be 2 years before we amend the ordinance, you have to wait. I don't think we ever would have done that either, so. Okay.
So I think they should be either grandfathered in or permits are free for them.
Well, there's no free permits, right, but cheap permits.
Cause if you're trying to change the rules, they permits should be free then for them. If you're trying to make them.
No, I'm not.
But if you erected a solar structure and you erected it in the right of way, you need to move it.
Well, true. It would be.
Okay, so just go through the permit process, we verify everything and you get a permit.
And again,
Pretty easy deal.
with Lee, I get what Lee's saying, but it isn't that we doesn't quite meet that criteria. Where a permit would have been required. It was just a matter of a definition of a structure. Is a solar panel a structure or is it not? That'd be a real interesting argument in court, but I'm not hoping we don't need to make that. And we just said things that are erected that require permits of a certain size. Whether it be a shed or a solar panel, both are structures. Pardon?
Or a windmill.
Yeah. So, but let's let that go for now. I mean, I get your point, but, and I'm sympathetic to us being as easy on people as we can be. But I don't think we start picking and choosing who we say is, we're not gonna charge a permit fee for.
Those ones that don't have permits wouldn't need a permit had they went through the process.
Right. But we're not gonna go, because there's some, clarification, misunderstanding that happens, and it's like, if somebody comes in and says, I forgot, we often would just issue the permit. If we find it, we say, oh, you're gonna get a double fee because you knew you needed it and you didn't. And that was frankly a way to make that permit tracking down revenue for the department as opposed to a citation that goes to the court. So,
Yeah, the state didn't require a permit. Or somebody put up solar panels.
we're an agent of the state. That's what county government is.
But if it's in the state statute that, that there was, they didn't need a permit, then why
No,
do they have to come to the county to get a permit from?
because the county is an arm of the state, frankly, that's why. So, anyway,
So was the goal here to get some suggested definitions from council, which we have in the email. But it sounds like we want to add one thing, which is only deny for cause.
yeah, that's.
So do we want to tweak this and?
Well, I was figuring we would go through and make whatever changes we're gonna have to make today, and then probably should we do another public hearing then cause we did an initial public hearing like 4 months ago. And each one's not really been a public hearing each time, we've been just review.
True.
Do we wanna have another public hearing?
Final public hearing.
With all the changes that we've made for these multiple months. And then give the public one more crack.
I think we have to, because we have done a lot of changes to what we
Yes.
did the initial public hearing on,
Yes.
no doubt about that.
Do we need to do a review again for this final public hearing? So that we,
Well, then you're,
If we can get satisfied with a package today, I think we don't need to review it again. I mean, because we could still make a change at the public hearing before we take it to county board. if we need to.
yeah. Cause I mean, if I'm gonna run it with the typical notice saying that we're doing, I wouldn't have a public hearing until August. I mean, I could do a special notice to have it in July, cause I can still meet that time frame. But
Yeah,
if I,
I'd like to see us do it in July if we can.
okay,
We can get
yep,
it up and running today. And it wouldn't hurt to have that as a separate notice anyway. Because it's not specific to a single person.
Yep.
It's a countywide
yep.
deal.
So,
So,
When it in July though, does that give it ample notice to the municipality based on the changes that were made some time ago? Or proper notice to?
that's a good question.
Because every municipality is affected by whatever changes go on here.
You're right, you're right. I kind of forgot about the reason we moved our date for a moment there. Kind of think we've been working on this so long, I'd like to see it get done,
I
but
understand.
not at the expense of a municipality missing opportunity to comment.
Yeah, as a county board, we changed that. So because of the dates of the different meetings of the municipalities.
Yeah, it's, we did that 2 weeks more to accommodate most everybody being able to get in on it. Yeah, I think you're right. I kind of forgot that. Good catch.
and that being the case, then we could do a quick review in July as a committee and then,
yeah, so
this looks perfect.
well, when I do the public notice, I have to have the final form ready for the public notice. So I would have to draft, cause that's gonna be out before our July meeting. So I will come up with changes, work with Stephanie, and then I'll put together a packet. We'd send that out to everyone.
Let's run through it, but recognize that any changes we make will have to be at that
At the
public hearing.
public hearing, you wouldn't be able to make
Right.
changes in July.
Right. I
But we'll
agree.
still run through it to make sure
Yep.
if anything, we should red flag for the hearing then,
Mhm.
okay? Makes sense?
Mhm. And if it makes it past Stephanie, then
Then we're golden, right?
sure.
So, are we good with that? Then?
So then if we're going on to the next memo, that was an email yesterday morning that you all should have received.
Salvage.
Salvage.
Junk memo?
Yes.
This pertains to the county's provision for salvage yards and where they can be, and then which pretty much mirrors the state statute, correct?
Mostly, I mean, there are nuanced differences for sure. The state statute is, more specific. And there's quite a few more definitions. But they get at the same thing.
I think in the state statute, it defines 10 automobiles. I don't think we have a definition
Right.
of a number. But we would not be able to allow more than 10. Anyway,
Right, well, more than 10, wrecked or scrapped or dismantled motor vehicles or vehicles kept stripped of parts would be in violation of the state junkyard statute. So we wouldn't be able to, even if we permitted and define, a junkyard as having 20 of these types of automobiles. The state statute regulations still apply.
Right, that's what I was trying to say poorly. Oh, good discussion on this. We were just looking at clarifying what we have as a definition in our ordinance, correct?
Yeah.
I do have a couple comments, Chairman Conroy, when you have time.
You bet, you bet.
Well, I got the email, the memo, and the statements made last month weren't as much about defining what a salvage yard is as much as what it was, how we're going about enforcing what our land use department is calling a salvage yard. I mean, when you look at the Wisconsin statute 84.31 that is mentioned in the memo, it says any place which is owned, maintained, operated, or used for storing, keeping, processing, firing, or selling junk. To me, more of that definition has to do with the place. And when we're talking about a person's residence, I think they're talking about a place being what its primary purpose is, meaning a place of business or a place that is meant solely, for the most part, for doing that. My whole point in the salvage yard definition, I'll just be very blunt about it. It's been used in the past to harass residents of our county. And what I'm looking at is more of an enforcement policy in place that maybe for residential properties, we want to look at the blessing of the township before we enforce some kind of salvage yard, finding and, penalties that way. Because there are instances in the past where maybe somebody says something they shouldn't say to the wrong person, and then they're harassed. That cannot happen in our county. That's where this comes from. I hate to be so blunt about it, but that's where it comes from.
Do we have any idea on the numbers of how many people have been harassed in the county?
Too many. I'll put it that way.
Well, no, because if it's a problem, we need to address it. So I guess I'm just curious if you could tell me how many.
And can you define harass, Duke? I don't understand.
Yeah, and
Harassed by the county official or by neighbors or?
By county officials. I mean, there are township chair supervisors that do not agree with past enforcement actions that have been taken on residents in their own township. And, that's not a secret over in Grantsburg Township for sure. So, I mean, if our town board officials do not agree with an enforcement action, that should tell us at the county level that we're not on the page we should be on with our townships. And this goes right back to townships questioning whether they want to be a part of county zoning. They don't have enough say on what goes on in their township just because zoning. I mean, I would recommend no township to do their own zoning because you have to have all your own enforcement and all those mechanisms. But we are not working with our townships in a hand-in-hand way when it comes to enforcement. So our townships need to be involved with that if you want to have a buy-in from them.
And I guess I have a question for Stephanie. So as far as some of these definitions go, when and where can we be less lenient than the state, or is the definition defined by the state and we don't have as much of a say?
I mean, we can define some of these terms however we choose to define them for county enforcement.
For enforcement purposes. Okay.
Enforcement, permitting, basic county use purposes. We can't change the state statute, so we wouldn't be able to prevent state action. But we can say we're not going to take any action on until there's a threshold of 20 automobile graveyard defined business or vehicles or something of that nature, and restrict county enforcement while not affecting state enforcement. But then the other portion is the nuisance ordinances, because there's a lot of overlap with some of the nuisance definitions compared to the salvage yard definitions.
And this is maybe where I just need some clarification. So who is generally charged with enforcing state laws? Like our police department, our
So that depends on the department responsible. Law enforcement can always write a ticket and take action if there's the appropriate type of violation. With regards to the junkyard specifically, it's the Department of Transportation who is empowered to enforce the state junkyard statutes.
So is the county planning on taking people's properties away from them, the way it looks here? You know, $1,000 a day, who can afford, you know, per offense? You know, is that what the county's opposition here is, you know, to be taking people's property away from them for having stuff on their property?
How many parcels is the county taking?
Well, I don't know, I'm just asking because $1,000 a day, it's, you know, for, says district attorney comments. An action of collecting the state forfeiture of $25 and $1,000 per offense with each day in violation.
That's the state, not the county.
But it really does all, even Duke's comment, it all boils down to the definition. You know, because if the definition for the county we feel is proper, then whoever enforces it from the county is following the definition. And I think the issue that, from what I've heard, and Duke and Lee, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at Burnett County Code 30-4, third line in there says, or for the collecting, dismantling, storage, or salvaging of machinery or vehicles not in running condition. That means I could have a really nice 1963 Chevy Impala, and I could have two junk Chevy Impalas sitting in my yard, and I'm against this ordinance. I've violated this ordinance.
is there a number applied to it though?
No, and not, the ordinance is right there. There's no number applied to it.
I mean, so that would maybe be the clarification is applying
In
something.
the state there is, but to me, that's the issue I think that
It's
these guys
applying.
are trying to get at is we could come by and say, hey, you can't do that. And you could say, well, these are parts for my really nice car that I,
Well, maybe that's maybe we need clarification.
that's what I'm saying is what we need to clarify is this definition, then we don't have all these problems.
Right. But no matter what, I think you're gonna have unhappy people. There's gonna be people that think it's too strict and people that think it's a hazard.
Yeah, I mean, since this is somewhat directed at me, I'll say, you know, we have 17 townships that are zoned, I think, something like that. I have townships that are unhappy that it's not enforced enough. So am I gonna I mean, the point of general zoning is to have one broad zoning that can be easily enforced. We can't enforce 17 different ordinances for each township. I mean, we could. Give me 5 more staff to do it. But that's the point of general zoning is you have a broad thing that covers everything. Some things you might not like, some you do.
One
I
thing.
don't know how to get past that, so.
It always is a kind of a case of where it is and what it is, who it is, right? But we don't have in this ordinance a maximum number, like you're talking about, you've got the 2 junk cars and then the license at collector plate Chevy, right? And that shouldn't be a violation. But some other counties, I think Washburn, for example, I think was a maximum of 4 unlicensed salvage vehicles. Burnett County never had that kind of a number, right? So, do we wanna, in a sense, mirror the state regulation and put a cap on a total number of 10 or some such number of unlicensed salvage vehicles before you needed a permit?
And just to clarify, I think you bring up a really good point, which is unlicensed vehicles, because it's not, you can own 20, 30 cars and have them all sitting around your storage shed or whatever, as long as they're all licensed and drivable and you wanna drive a different one every day of the month. But the unlicensed is, I think, is the key to now you're getting them there for parts or storage or, whatever.
True, and a certain amount of it is it a commercial activity or not?
Right.
Is it a hobby? I think Duke has raised that point. That if you're a collector and you might have 8 or 10 to get one when you're done, right?
Yep.
But you're doing it as a hobby, and you're under that cap, you should be okay. So maybe that's the thing to do is put a cap where less than a certain number, we don't care really. And if it gets to be big enough or, egregious enough, then we have the authority to take action.
Yeah, and I would throw out the automobile graveyard Wisconsin statute, it says 10 or more. Could we just somehow take automobile graveyard verbiage and put it into our ordinance? And if you get to the automobile graveyard point, you've gone too far. So under 10, you're fine.
And I understand that, but, and speaking to hobby, someone's junk might be a hobby, so that's hard to, include in a definition. But is it, more than 10 autos and more than 10, I mean, there's several different categories of junk, and so it's like cumulatively.
How many appliances
How many
do you have in your yard?
That's
appliances, vehicles,
another issue.
farm machinery, collectible.
I'm a refrigerator expert. I've got 200 refrigerators in my backyard. They can be parted out.
But I think the reason it's cars are the one you see here, they're ubiquitous, right?
Yeah.
And also they're full of stuff that's toxic, brake fluid, oil, gas, antifreeze, all of those things.
Or refrigerators.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
But we also have a boat
Boats,
graveyard.
there's actually, we had a golf cart, still do, I think, a golf cart
Yeah.
guy, and it looks like a salvage yard in an airport, but it's not. Golf carts, that's in Trade Lake, I think.
I gotta chime in on Jason's comment there, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. We can't have different ordinances and enforcement actions necessarily for all the townships. I mean, you can't expect Jason to do that in his department. But what I'm getting at is it should not be up to an individual or department when it comes to enforcement. I'm not saying we need big changes to the definitions and all those things, but local township officials, they're elected locally by the people that live closest to them. Is it that much to ask to actually have before there's enforcement action? I'm not talking septic. That's a totally different thing, Jason. You made that point before, and I agree. But when it comes down to it, yeah, there are a lot of junky places in the county that are not acted upon, and then there's some that, geez, it doesn't seem to me like there's much of a problem, and they are. It shouldn't be too much to ask to say, hey, let's work with our townships before we do enforcement action on some of these, cases that come up. Let's get the local townships blessing first. I mean, that shouldn't be that complicated to do. Because we got to remember, we talk about these public hearings and people can come to our meetings, and they should. But the reality is people elect us to represent them in our districts. It doesn't matter if it's the county level, the state level. They want you to be their voice. They don't want to come to all these meetings all the time. And I'm sure you guys do the same as I do, as I talk to a lot of people in our district. And I say what I say because it's what they want. They don't have time to come to these meetings. If they don't like how I represent them, they won't like me again. So I want to see something done more at the local level to work with our townships because, yeah, they do get tired of even the zoning things, much less enforcement. We got to work more together with our townships.
I was gonna say, I think what you're getting at too is there's two different things here. One of them is what the ordinance should say, and the second one is what the policy should be.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I feel like we have an obligation if somebody calls Jason's team and says, the property next to me is affecting my value because it's full of junk. And I believe it's against, County Ordinance 30-4. Don't we have an obligation to go look at that property, come up with a determination, something?
Yeah, that would be dereliction of duty if I.
I mean, you can't just call the township and say, oh, here you go, I'm passing this on to you.
No, I agree with that comment. I think Jason should go and look at those things. But before he sends a letter of action, it needs to be ran by the township at least, because most likely the township officials already know about it. And they'll say, hey, great, Jason's doing his job. Or they'll say, you know what? Give us a chance to talk to those people. We haven't heard of this issue before. It'll curtail some of these problems between townships, enforcement, and residents.
Would it be burdensome if you are sending a notice of violation to an individual. If you included an email to the county or to the town person. And then if they choose to try to work with that person to help them somehow, I just, you
Well, it
know,
almost sounds like you would wanna have the township involved before you sent the violation
I
letter.
think so.
Cause once it's violation letter status, you're kind of in the queue now of
Well,
okay, so
moving
the
forward.
reason I find that a little bit challenging is, you know, if these are ordinances, that's almost like saying before you give someone a speeding ticket, you have to check with the town. Before you and need a building permit, you have, I mean, we're already doing a lot of that, but I just don't know that we have the staffing to.
well, if you look at it from just for building for a second, we're working with the towns for the UDC. Providing applications or
Well, they contract that out though.
they
The townships
contract out,
don't
but I
do
mean,
that.
we're trying to help them. Keep that in compliance.
Yep.
So this, at the same time, saying that we, maybe nothing more than a policy that would say that should we receive a complaint on this matter, we would refer it to the town. You know, we just received this, what do you guys have to say about it? You know, that isn't necessarily gonna be that the town is gonna say, don't pursue it. If we have other people that feel it's bad enough, we're still gonna have to look at it, but at least get them in the loop right away. So we can get a comment out of it.
Yeah, I guess I see a couple scenarios, what, you know, the township says it doesn't respond, so then I don't know.
Right.
Is that gonna seem like that's an answer of okay to proceed? Or if they object, then I guess I'm gonna kind of go about, ask Stephanie, like, okay, someone complained about something. The township doesn't want me to do anything about it. Tell me, what do I do?
I'll get back to you on that.
Then the applicant, you know, the complainant will file a mandamus to compel you to do something. Right?
I could.
That can happen.
And so would you set a time limit for hearing back from the individual town? 60 days or 90 days or whatever before you?
I think it's a case of that if the town wants to participate actively, then they'd get back to us. And I'm pretty sure my town probably wouldn't respond because they wouldn't want to get involved, you know, at least in the past. Maybe now, through the supervisors, they might, but the towns are, there's 21 towns and there's 21 different potential reactions. Right? That's, go ahead.
Where'd you draw the lines on you? Cause you could even put farms into that. Some of these old farms that ain't being used no more, they got a lot of vehicles sitting there. But so how are you gonna distinguish between autos to farms to refrigerators to golf carts? You're gonna be playing the prejudice, you're
Well, here's
against some of them and not the other ones, and
here's the argument, I'd say that that's not the way it would be. Because we're forgetting that most of what we do as far as enforcement is complaint driven. We don't go looking for this stuff, driving around. Okay, that old farmer's got a threshing machine and a couple of old, hay forks and a horse-drawn rake out there. No, that, we don't care.
no, because you've probably been here for a long time. I lived here my whole life. That
Me
wouldn't have
too.
been an issue ever up until these last few years when you get all these big shots moving in from all over that think they can tell everyone who's lived here all their life how that we should
But see, again,
conduct ourselves. So
looking at that though, I mean, I lived there longer than you have, I think. But those, we
I
compare
was
those
born in
afterwards.
60, so that's how long I've been here.
74, I gotcha. Anyway, long story short, we all understand that, and there's not enough staff. We're running around. Most of these things come up with somebody complained or you happen to see something. And the last thing, you know, my uncle used to have a whole yard full of old farm stuff until his wife couldn't take it anymore and made him have an auction, right? But that's how it usually gets solved, right?
Either that or if you luck out and you don't have one of these big shots buy land next to you, you'll get by and you'll never have to worry. But I don't understand how some big shot can come flying in and tell someone who lived their whole life and all of a sudden how to run your land, and no, you worry about yours. If we're gonna worry about the value thing, why don't we start with have funds for everything else? If we have to start raising money for funds to just put up a fence, if it's that much of an eyesore from that guy to see, because probably the guys on these sides don't care.
Well, again, I think you're presuming that it's gonna be searching out for enforcement of this stuff, and this is incidental, and yeah, we might get a complaint. That's because the guy complained. You go take, you look at what he's complaining about, it's been like that for 40 years, no, there's not an issue with, you know. You don't, just because they complain doesn't mean they get run things either, right?
Well, they usually do.
And the other side of it is,
From what I've
I used to be a zoning administrator too, okay? We'd have a complaint about a guy that said, because they didn't have his wood piled up neatly in the yard. I said, look, you're not regulating lifestyle. He wants it in a stack instead of a row, I don't care, right? But you have to be, you know, we respond to that kind of stuff all the time. But when you do have one that's creating a problem, you do have to be able to deal with it. There's got to be a little bit of trust and discretion of staff to know the difference between a frivolous complaint and a meaningful.
Some of this comes back to discussion that the committee has previously had regarding the land use permit and opening up your whole property to inspection when you apply for a land use permit for an addition. And, you know, that's where you get opening the whole property to inspection and someone being told that their wood piles that are covered with tarps are salvage, or they're in an agricultural zone and they have what would be classified as a salvage tractor, and they need to get rid of it even though that was a family heirloom with the intention of restoring. So it also comes back to, as I said, what the committee has previously discussed regarding opening your whole property up for an inspection when you're there for one specific item.
Well, that goes back to, I'm gonna say, an obligation to enforce the rules that we have. So that when we see the lack of a chain down septic tank,
Yep.
that's a code violation.
Where I was going with that is it's not necessarily complaint driven.
No, but that is a separate matter of public health, safety and welfare, right? If you're going to do the addition and the person's got sewage surfacing under drain field, that's not okay to stay like that.
Yeah, but that's different than the salvage topic here.
Right, it is.
Yep.
Yeah, and then again, you've got to rely on the staff to know the difference.
But if we have a complaint about salvage issue, then somebody from your team that goes on property to look at the salvage, and notices this building that's 20 degrees leaning over, about ready to fall over. Isn't it, are you obligated to say something like, this has got to be taken care of, it's a safety issue? Or your septic tank doesn't even have a lid on it, if you see something, you have to take action, in my opinion.
That gets back into our enforcement discussion
Yes.
later, but we have a whole bunch of things, and then, as I've been saying, the counties are agents of the state to regulate this private sewage stuff and a lot of other stuff. Because it's the state created the counties and then assigned them all this stuff, and then took away our discretion too. Right, Duke? But anyway, the reality is the county, we have some things that are definite public health, public safety, welfare. Things that you see are necessary to deal with when you see them, but you're not sneaking in under the backyard and climbing the fence to look for a violation either. You know, and then you're looking at this way, Ramona, if you apply for a permit, you kind of have made an invitation to visit the property, and then if you find something else that's significant, that'll have to be corrected.
Well, it's just something that was discussed at committee level past.
Right, and it's the degree of which, but when you find, or I'll give you just anecdotally, I had a complaint from a trout fisherman about a sewage outfall pipe into a trout stream. Well, I had to go look for that. I could do it without trespassing, as a way down the stream, But, and ultimately we found it. I couldn't find it, by the way. Game warden had passed it on to me. So I had to figure out where that is, but eventually we found it and ordered it corrected. You know, there is again into the public waters of the state. So you have to do what you have to do.
Question for Stephanie. You, from the state statute, we've got definitions here for junkyard, junk, and automobile graveyard. Was there a state definition for salvage yard?
Not for salvage, they use the term junkyard.
So we use the term salvage,
Yes.
not the state.
Yes.
What do we think about not stop using that term and just go with the state and use junkyard, junk, and automobile graveyard?
There are, just for completion's sake, there are more than just those terms defined in the junk statute. For the state statute, those were just the ones that I thought were relevant to the discussion that we've been having. But there would be, I mean, there are other parts in the code of ordinances where we just wholesale adopt a state definition, and there's value in that in terms of when the state statute gets updated, we don't have to retroactively cross-reference and fix all of that. It's certainly something that could happen.
I feel like a lot of our discussion is coming because our definition of salvage yard is very gray. And the more gray it is, the more you have issues.
Should we recommend recrafting our definition to mirror the state, basically?
I agree with Supervisor Szymanski on that. The salvage yard definition we have is very, very wide ranging. Just down around the corner from my house, there's a disabled man that action was taken after him for having stumps, a big pile of stumps in his yard. The stumps weren't even ones he put there. Our township and the county put them in his yard after getting permission, and then he got enforcement action on him. And in my mind, he was taken advantage of. But I mean, this salvage yard thing is way too broad. It can be used as a hammer on people, and just about anything meets the definition of it. If you don't like someone, or if you're, say they got a building permit and you walk on their property to look at the building permit, if they say something you don't like, it's used as a hammer on them. That's what I've seen.
Would it seems like it might be cleaner to adopt a state definition and then we tweak how we enforce, then we discuss how we enforce it. I mean, not having the full state statute in front of us. I wonder if because it might be cleaner. And if we find parts of that are overly restrictive, then maybe it's like, okay, this isn't the right thing to do.
I mean, I can certainly bring back the full statute and do some more, put some more information together, whatever you'd like to see.
Yeah, could we, in order to try to keep within our time frame, could we do that? So that in our next meeting, we have a draft of revised definition.
Sure.
And then if we like.
So me and Stephanie would basically strip out salvage yard out of, or, strike that out of, proposed change would be strike that out of chapter 30 and insert all the state definitions of junkyard, auto graveyard, whatever other.
Leave the salvage yard word there and then put C.
Oh, yeah, C.
State statute.
C. Yeah, make the statute reference.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ours could be something like salvage yard includes, the following defined in state statutes or.
Yeah, something.
Trying to make it as easy as possible.
And then, because there's two things, like I said before, there are two issues. One of them is what I should say in the ordinance, and the second is an agreed upon policy, which is not in the ordinance exactly of how we enforce it.
Right.
So let's use that two-tiered approach to proceed with this.
So we will have changes then for July, proposed changes, but we're gonna notice it for a public hearing in August.
Yeah.
And then you guys can make suggested changes. July, we could note potential changes for the August public hearing.
Right. But we wouldn't make them until then.
No.
That would keep us all.
Otherwise, you gotta push it back a month if you
No.
guys wanna review it
I
again.
think we wanna do it again.
Out to September.
I think we mostly got it. It's just that this is a conundrum, really, and try to get a way through this. That's reasonable, so.
And that being said, I mean, everyone seems to have concerns because there's going to be people who are unhappy either way. And I'm wondering if on a township level or another level, if you feel like there's people that are going to have a hard time staying within the boundaries, you know, is it at the town level or whatever that there's brainstorming, how can we help this person to conform? You know, be it fencing, it's like, do you develop a fund to help them? You know, do you work with the Lions Club? It's like, rather than, it's like, not everyone's gonna be happy with whatever we have. It's gonna be too lenient or too strict for somebody. And so then, you know, can somewhere along the way.
That's always the case.
I know, but I just, obviously not everyone's going to be pleased with what we end up with.
No,
So there might be
I
other
think-
things that towns can do.
I think we're clarifying though, if we're gonna try to eliminate confusion and what. You know, make it clear, this is what the standards are as adopted by the state. And then this is within the realm of how, when we get to enforcement, we can talk a little bit about how we would write some policy to establish that. That would probably be as close as we're gonna get to something manageable.
And on the, I mean, we're not talking necessarily enforcement, but I do find it concerning when I hear comments about people being picked on. And so if we have an issue, we need to deal with it, but I don't know what the issues are. And it's like, you know, in a report, it's like, it's like, this is how many letters I sent out, or this is how many enforcements were actively. I feel like it's this vague thing that I hear people are being picked on, but I don't know who, how many,
I really appreciate those comments, Karen, and I'll tell you that I guess underneath our current definition of a salvage yard in the county ordinances 30-4, it doesn't matter what the person's story is even, because they're guilty by definition of what our county ordinance says. So I mean, regardless of the circumstance, that is so broad, they can't fight it in court even. So I appreciate your comments and I understand where you're coming from, but it's because they're gonna be considered guilty based on how it's written, regardless of the circumstance.
Okay, so clearing up the definition should resolve that.
Yeah, that's how we'll approach it anyway. So,
Sounds good.
then on, moving on to enforcement, or maybe more of a. Stephanie,
Sorry, what?
are we done with that?
I think so, if you guys are. That was the solar and the salvage junk stuff, I think was the only other items to talk about in the proposed changes.
We've exhausted those topics.
For today.
Today, yeah.
If we're adding the definition of solar to the definitions, are you also going to be adding either the definition of renewable energy or the definition of wind? Because that will be the next topic.
The regulations for solar are identical to the regulations for wind in terms of state law. So it would be easy to say solar or wind energy systems.
Makes sense. Then do we need to add something for wind that says see solar or energy wind systems?
We will, we'll try to put something in there and we can look at it in July. How's that sound? I mean, we'll give a stab at it and see what you think. We're not a very good wind area anyhow.
No, we're not viewed as a very promising place for wind. So oddly, we are a pretty good spot for solar, as it turns out. But again, wind is a different breed of cat too, because it's visible from so much farther away. And there's bird strikes and all kinds of other controversy about wind.
Noise, I think those turbines make noise, people complain about those, so where solar is generally quiet other than inverters and.
Bird kill on the,
Yeah.
turbines.
Yep.
I think we're less likely to see much wind development. We could see some, but solar is the likely one that we'll see.
Well, thank you guys for the discussion and all that stuff, and Jason, I appreciate your efforts. I really agree with you on the, you know, having common enforcement rules and policies across the county, and we gotta remember we need that at the state level too. So I mean, if it comes down to where there are some common sense definitions that need to be changed regarding solar and wind at the state level, hey, I'm all ears. Let's make sure it applies to the whole state though, and it makes sense for everybody, just like we do with our county ordinances. But if you want changes there, tell me about them.
Okay, no, that's, we'll see when we get our drafts out, maybe that'll be a point of some further discussion. So. Anyway, on to the enforcement discussion.
Just one quick note as you're looking at the updates. Under what is enforced, item number 4, I'm sorry, that should have been in yellow. That was an add, so that was a change. We added state statutes as one of the things that's enforced.
Right, and we were originally talking about enumerating them, and then for the very same reasons we're talking about here, they're gonna change. But so just generally, so both state laws and administrative codes promulgated under those state laws. So like when you're talking about the wastewater stuff, it's SPS 381, 82, and 83. And that's promulgated under, I think, chapter 145 and 144, right?
Yep, and then all those have cross references to, then they refer to other statutes for,
Well,
yeah.
The thing to keep in mind is whether the statutes that pertain to zoning are this high, the administrative codes, you know, go up to the ceiling.
I do have a question on citizen complaints. Are there anonymous complaints? Is the person, you know?
Yeah, so how typically, some counties have a form they have to fill out, we don't have one, we'll take, you know, if somebody wants to just call the office and say, hey, there's something going on, and if people wanna be anonymous, they'll a lot of times they'll call up and they'll be like, hey, I wanna complain about da 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 da. But I wanna be anonymous. Well, then we're like, well, we already know your phone number now, cause we see it on our caller ID. So I'm like, you know, I tell people, if you tell me like your name and stuff, and I go, I'm not gonna lie on the witness stand for you. If I go and get called up in a court case and they say who complained, I'm gonna say, if I know who you are, I'm not gonna lie for you. So I tell people, if you truly wanna be anonymous, you better send us a letter, no return address, no signature, to our office. But then, you know, some people wanna be anonymous, but then they're like, I wanna be anonymous, but let me know how it turns out. Well, you can't have it both ways. You're either anonymous or you're gonna tell us who you are, and then we can give you an update of how things happen.
I'm guessing there's a way to do it, because I know like the DNR has hotlines where you can, I mean.
Yep.
So just the fact that you know. I mean, there probably could or should be a policy, you know, who you can tell. I mean, I don't know if there's any legal standing for anonymity for.
It kind of depends on what it is, I'm gonna say, like, you know, to the curmudgeon story, like I sometimes do, I got a call on a Sunday one time. The guy's putting in an illegal outfall pipe septic system on Long Link on my Birchwood. So, okay, I'll be, you know, there'll be a boat tied up at the dock at the resort for you to use to go out to the island where he's putting this in. So, as if the guy who owned the resort didn't want to go on the record, but he didn't want to see the guy running the sewage into the lake either, right? So I went out there and found the boat, motored out down, tied up on the dock, walked up the hill, and the guy was digging, using a rototiller to soften the ground and dig in a trench to run the pipe, but he hadn't done anything yet. He had the pipe all piled on the ground by the shed. So I waited till he shut the rototiller off and said, oh, hey, hi, how you doing? And scared him half to death, but I said, you know what, you haven't really done any of your plumbing yet, so if you build this hole back up. And go spend the rest of the afternoon, it was his brother's place he was working on. You know, go over to the bar and have a couple of beers later. We'll forget about it, and he did, and we replaced that system then later on, but you know. That was an anonymous complaint, right? But it would have been the right thing to do is to investigate it. So.
I think that would be part of it.
One issue about anonymous complaints is if the individual who's being cited contests the citation, a lot of times it's the complainant or the witness who is the one who can prove the violation. I mean, we can go in and take pictures and do some of those things, but that doesn't always get to proving a ticket. So it's hard when somebody wants to stay anonymous to also fully enforce what's being complained about.
And I've said that before to people as well, when they tell me something that's going on, and I say, well, are you willing to testify in court? You know, some are yes, some are no.
Well, I also don't want to intimidate people who might have something valid to say for fear of, and so I think there are probably some standards in place that we could ask what people do, and that could be part of the enforcement policy, because we also, if someone has a very valid thing that is due to public safety, we don't want to intimidate them from coming forward, or it's like, well, never mind, I guess I'm not gonna say anything because my neighbor has rage issues, yeah.
Well, isn't there a law for the person, the accuser, to be able to face,
Is your accuser?
face
Yeah.
your accuser?
Yeah.
You know, if you want to remain anonymous,
Right.
the person that's being accused has the right to face the accuser.
I know, I think there's a lot of subtleties, because I know there's like DNR hotlines where people essentially remain anonymous. And I'm saying at higher court levels, maybe it doesn't stand up because it's like, well, where's your proof? But I think on a day-to-day basis, can there be an assumed level of anonymity unless it, I mean,
And see, that was kind of my point, was it depends on what it is
right,
that you reported. If it's somebody doing something that's fairly innocuous, you know, you may go check it out, but if it's something that would be pretty egregious, obviously you gotta find out if that violation exists first before you pursue it.
right. I guess I'd like it to just be part of the policy. If someone says, well, who turned me in? That we're not saying, oh, well, it was so-and-so and here's their phone number. I mean,
Well, everything's a public record though. We got that too. I can't sit there and say, I'm gonna hide this information because I am,
I would just be
open record
curious.
laws apply.
But I'd just be curious how those other hotlines work. I mean, there is a system, so I'm not saying.
And you gotta remember, I don't think the state, some of those like open records, aren't some of those state agencies exempt from different open
Well,
record
it's like-
things?
It'd just be interesting to look
It's like
at.
the DNR poachers hotline type of thing.
Yeah,
800 number, whatever it is, you know, that they get tips on, but then they investigate the tips and there's, you know, it's law enforcement. However, and arguably that septic I was talking about was a state law violation, done it, you know. Would have been more than just a county code. But you need to know if it's really is there. too. So sometimes you're gonna take that anonymous tip and try to see if there's any smoke or any fire where that smoke is, right?
yeah, I like to check out when people call up and tell me something because I'm not gonna send a letter or put my name on something if it's not there.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't follow up.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think we need to look into what can we do, what can't we do? I mean, I think there's just a lot of things out there, and I legally don't know what we can and can't do, and so I'm interested in knowing. Can people remain somewhat anonymous up to a certain level, you know?
Well, we have that contact us form on our website. They can leave all their stuff blank if they want. Or put in fake phone numbers and fake email addresses, you know, to file a complaint. No, they can call our office, they can send us letters. So I mean, there's various ways they can do it right now. But there's no, like, you know, zoning violation hotline. There isn't one of those set up, so.
I'm just curious to know, I mean, what other people have done about this and what our procedure is, because if you're just going to, if someone asks and you're gonna say it was this, I mean, do you have the obligation to tell them who turned them in? And I'm curious about.
I believe I have no other information.
If you're asked information completely, I don't know what, not voluntarily say, hey, your neighbor so-and-so
No.
called and made the complaint first before they even wanna know who made the
No, but
complaint.
typically it is who complained about me.
Right.
And I don't think I have the right to say none of your business. Cause I work for everyone.
I'm just curious about.
No.
Well, you get something like, you know, the next time you're driving down whatever road, take a look at the, just before you get to the stop sign, you know, kind of thing, and you might, then you do that, you see the violation, right? So. And you get that, you know, that somebody working mowing them right away at the town road found an outfall pipe running into the North Fork of the Clam. So you should look at that next time you drive by there. So, well, I could see it when I knew where to look. So there's that too.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure which things were, you know, fell under any sort of protection or privacy, and just curious to know what other counties do.
I'm not aware of any confidentiality statute with regards to zoning, like there is with DHS and medical records and social services records and things like that. Or I can check the.
Okay. Anything further?
Any other comments or suggestions or?
I think we can clarify the state statute one into just the general provisions and not go into specific,
I was gonna say, do we want to just put something like, you know, as applicable?
something to that.
Say, and we could do the same with ordinances, really. I mean, it's sort of implied, but
Well,
Yeah, cause you have some ordinances that might not, well, I don't know. I guess a zoning of airport height is probably a zoning ordinance, but it's in its own whole chapter. It's not in the zoning chapter.
right, and then,
So I mean, there's a whole list of ordinances in chapter 18, that's the nuisance health stuff, that's technically not a zoning ordinance as well. So there's a
it's not to
whole,
be real specific. It's.
yeah,
This is more, just like I said, and we talked the last time about, is this a policy or is this guidelines, and either one doesn't really matter, just pick one.
Yeah.
I put them both in there, so.
it's just that there's more, I'm gonna, you know, just clarify, there's a lot more stuff than just the land use ordinance.
Right.
There's, and probably the staff probably spends as much or more time on the sanitary side than it does in the land use. Usually you do your other inspections on your way to inspecting installation, but stuff, right? That's the state is supposed to, we're supposed to inspect every one, you know, so. That control, I always felt that controlled my day more than anything else.
you know, and I guess, what are you looking to get out of this? I mean, this. Part of me says this is pretty vague. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I have somebody that we're going on 4 years of trying to get into compliance. How many emails and things do I need? Is it at some point we're like, okay, we're done, we have to do a citation? I mean.
Well, theoretically, it's always a stepped
Yep.
notice, citation, summons and complaint.
How many do you want me to do though?
How much time?
You know, the thing is, those people don't just ignore you forever, right? But some
Correct,
will.
some will, yeah.
And there's been cases where, for example, on one that might involve a tax delinquent property, but we choose not to take it because it's a Superfund site. You know, so there's no real clean answer to that. But I think if it comes to a point where it's been a long time and you could bring that to the committee, I think, and again, Stephanie would know if we needed to do that in a closed session or not. It's a potential litigation. But it might be the way to approach it, when you get one that, okay, what do we do now? Rather than you make the call, bring it to here.
I guess I don't have an issue with making the call, but I guess if you don't want me to make the call. Then I'll bring every month we can have, here's a list of issues and go through it. I don't know, we'd have to do it in closed session probably, cause
Probably,
it's
yeah.
potential litigation.
Yep.
I think that's over the top for taking time away from more important stuff for both you and Stephanie.
Mhm.
But I think we'd expect you when it reaches a tipping point that you need to initiate the next action.
I think we could probably set a tipping point. I mean, because if there's not that many that just kind of ignore that, we could, set a level and then and that doesn't mean, well, we absolutely have to do something, but at least some sort of a trigger that's less vague than.
True. But I mean, let's put it this way, let's put Jason's discretion. This is what I think we should talk about. Because we gotta take the next step and do a long form complaint or whatever you decide to do, that you're looking at. And if you think that's appropriate to bring to the committee, we'll do it. But I don't think every time you have.
And I would, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, to me, that's just part of the reason why we have guidelines is to make your life easier. So there should be something in here that says, we will issue 3 notices and then that's it. And then you go to a citation or 2 notices, that's it. You having to file all this stuff somewhere and worry about it and pull it back up every 6 months is kind of ridiculous. And I thought that was part of our job, is to make policies for you guys.
Well,
Make it
Yeah.
easier.
And our job is to support the decision once it's made,
Right.
So whatever it takes to get unanimity on that, I think.
I don't think it needs to be more than one time on notice to the town board. If Jason sends a letter to the township and they have a board meeting coming up and they discuss it at their town board meeting and say, yeah, let's support the county's efforts to enforce that, or let's not. I don't think you need to send it more than once. It's just, I think it's an important step to take.
Is that talking just salvage stuff or are we talking everything now?
And
We're talking about general enforcement
Yeah,
of
we're talking about,
everything.
Yeah.
we're talking
I'm
about.
not seeing septic. Septic is a really big deal. You run into them all the time. If there's leaky septic on the ground, you get in the surface water, my goodness, you gotta take care of that because it's a health hazard. But when it comes to general complaints, I mean, you're dealing with one now, Jason, off of Biston Road in Township of West Marshall, and I know that. That parcel is actually owned by a auto salvage place or something. So I mean, but I think just other enforcement things like that, not septic, not things that are serious like that.
When you have a code violation, do you inform the towns?
No.
So Duke, the towns aren't even informed on these?
No, I go to several town meetings and it comes up more often than you think. And it gets town board supervisors worked up in some townships, I would imagine, others maybe not. But I just think that when we talk about relationships in general with the townships, I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, I think it'd be ridiculous to ask Jason to send notices 3 months in a row and not get a response from the towns and all this kind of stuff. But I guess for me, I mean, Karen even talked about, can they be anonymous or whatever? No. If you're gonna stand up and say that your neighbor's property looks like garbage, that should be known as well. I mean, the people that are gonna be possible and have the enforcements on them, their name is gonna be joked to the public. So I mean, yeah, I just wanted to go through the township at least once.
Well, it depends on what we're talking about, though. The towns don't have standing to do the sanitary code. That's the county's obligation. I think when we're talking about your failure to get a land use permit or the addition or whatever, I think that doesn't need, that's what the town signed on to zoning for, is to make sure we got that done. But I think when you're talking about a complaint on an activity or or whatever else, then I see the point then.
But which complaints?
Well, when we were talking salvage or junk, whatever, some of that ongoing stuff that is more ubiquitous, but you know, there's a fresh violation, I don't see that.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
guess
mean, the one Jason's working on, I think right now in our township, geez, the person bought a lot on a 40 that was subdivided. Within a week, it had like a dozen cars on it for storage. So, I mean, the township, I'm sure Jason would support enforcement action there. It's just, it isn't like it's gonna change the world if we waited for one town board meeting for them to, you know, having public record that yes, we support enforcement action here or not. I mean, and write it up so that they don't respond that you're gonna do what you see fit.
I just think we're gonna have to have it part of our policy if so what you're suggesting is that the towns get to decide whether or not something is enforced?
Well, we pretty much do that right now. We take the recommendations from the townships on zoning actions that we take and those sort of things. We gotta remember that, yeah, the county, I mean, when the township turns their zoning over to us, it's because the townships don't have the resources like we do at the county with Jason and his staff. It's not because they wanna not be a voice for the residents. So that's why I think this step is important. It's not that they wanna wash their hands of it and the county has total control. It's all that the townships gave up this zoning and enforcement to the county because they don't have the resources. It's not that they don't want to be involved.
But so Duke, if I understand you correctly, you're suggesting that every time there's an issue that Jason has to follow up on, he informs the town. And then we're looking for the town to either back them or not respond or.
Yeah, I think so, Randy, but I'm only one of us, you know, I mean, I got one opinion out of all of us in the room. We gotta work together, but other than safety type things like septic, I mean, Lee and I got involved in a septic issue that turned out, you know, to be something that wasn't on the up and up. But it's just important on septic type issues. I mean, if it's blatant violation and you're running your sewage out on the ground and it's getting into the ditch and surface water, yeah, we want Jason to jump on that. That's important. But all these other enforcement things, yeah, I'd like to see it go through the town, at least go through one of their official town board meetings for the month. And I mean, it's not hard to have it on the agenda and say, oh, there's enforcement action on ABC property. And most of the time, town officials know what's going on in their township. There's been complaints from residents. They say, yep, write them up. Or say, no, let's take the time to talk to them and then we'll follow up with Jason or something. But I think there's gotta be that step.
Is the township gonna notify the person that they're on the agenda for discussion at the town board meeting?
Well, I'm not on the town board, but I can tell you that when I am back in district there, especially after June, I try very hard to go to the township meetings in District 7 of the county, which is Lincoln and West Marshland. I even go to the Grantsburg ones sometimes. And yeah, I'll be mentioning it. We should all be doing that. We should all be going back to our townships and talking about what we're doing at the county level to make your job easier, Jason, not harder.
Yeah, so my thought would be, let's say I send a letter to the town of West Marshland and say I have a potential enforcement action against John Smith. The town's gonna put that on their agenda. Is the township gonna contact John Smith and go, hey, John Smith, we're talking about you 2 nights from now on our agenda? Cause they don't contact those people and let them know they're gonna be on the agenda. So is the township gonna notice John Smith and say, John, you might wanna come to our meeting, we're gonna be talking about you?
I suppose they could, but the thing is, if the town looks at that and say, yeah, that's a definite issue and we've had a lot of complaints, we've already talked to them, because a lot of times, I think some of the time anyway, these things are known about before you know about the issue.
I think some are, I just don't think all of them are.
But I mean, that's just, you know, before you send a letter off to the outfit saying, hey, you're gonna get fined so much a day until you move this, I think that step needs to be taken. And if, you know, at least then the township is aware of what's going on, they have an opportunity to step in if they want to. It's not hard these days to communicate. I mean, about those. I think it'd go a long ways and gaining more support for what you do in our relationship with their towns.
I would have a legal concern with, if we put it to the township to take action before we continue taking action. That's an additional procedural step, so the requirements of due process would apply. And if the township doesn't notify the individual and give the individual the ability to be heard before taking administrative action, that can't happen. And so to put a requirement on another entity to do something to allow us to be able to do something, everyone has to get their ducks in a row in terms of the legal processes and the notifications and ability to participate and ability to be heard and ability to challenge and present evidence. And in order for that portion to not be legally concerning.
And that gets back to the point of why the towns participate in comprehensive zoning in the first place, because you're virtually in order for it to be meaningful, they almost have to take a zoning-like action of their own. So I'm not sure how excited the towns would really be that involved.
Well, am I correct that you are a town chair? And what do you think of being informed of every violation in your town?
It depends on what it is, I would guess. I mean, if it's like Duke is saying septic, go after that. I mean, if it's in shoreland zoning, the town has no authority over that anyway.
Right.
Plus, that's serious, but some of this little or petty stuff, it's like it's easier for us to go talk to our friends than it is. Some people get intimidated, all the big bully government's coming after me, blah, blah, blah. Where one of us could walk up to them and just say, come on, get your head out of your hiney here, let's do whatever.
Yep.
And he might just come right around and just do it.
It kind of goes back to my point of trying to write a policy or a requirement of this. It's really cumbersome. Just let's rely on our staff to recognize when there's something that maybe the town should see if it can fix first, without formalizing it. I think when we try to formalize it, is where we run into trouble. And okay, but this town will do it and the other town doesn't want anything to do with it, type of thing, or that's why we hired you guys, that's the catch-22 I see.
As a town chair, I have been approached numerous times because they feel more comfortable approaching the town rather than, as Jeff is saying, what they would view as, someone that's got the club. And so, I mean, I've had farmers approach me asking, do I need a land use permit for this? And my response has always been, well, I'm not sure, but let me check. So then I call Jason and I ask Jason without using names and find out in advance what are the requirements for this particular action. And so far, anything that I've been told has always been, if it's in an agricultural zone, it's 100% agricultural use, no permit is needed. And that satisfies the person calling me and they go about doing what they need to do. And so I don't have a problem being involved. I appreciate that the residents are comfortable reaching out to me and asking me questions. And I don't mind being the go-between. So if there's something like Randy is asking about that needs to have the go-between, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm only one municipality out of the whole county that's willing to take that on.
And I think that's how it's supposed to work.
Correct.
Really, and I think we could rely on it to work like that. I think that's just a matter of where I see us really trying to quantify it is where we run into trouble. Say, okay, this is exactly how we want to do it. I think they just gotta just be a matter of talking, maybe not initiating an action at the county level without if it looks like we should talk to the town first, but have some discretion that where is that likely to do some good and where is it not gonna help, you know? And I mean, I think, I get the discussion, I think it's a really good discussion to have, and one we maybe should try to pull together in a towns association meeting or something sometime, get everybody involved, but everybody, in my experience with the towns in 2 different counties, that everyone is different. And as elections change membership, things change too.
Yes.
I see Jackson changing quite a bit from a couple of longtime supervisors no longer being on, and a couple new younger ones stepping in, and they're gonna have a different view, no doubt. But it's a different, and Jackson's a lot different than Trade Lake, right? So
One thing that I do see that would be helpful as a town chair is such as the rezone you just had this morning. When the applicant would come to the county and ask, what do I need to do for a rezone? They're told, we'll talk to the municipality. The municipality says, well, I don't know what you're planning to do. Do you know what you're planning to do? Well, no. Well, then you need to talk to the county and then come back to the municipality. So if they have some direction from the county first and then come talk to the municipality, that would go a long way toward helping me know what to do for the agenda.
I think, speaking only for myself, I think we try to do that, but it's often pretty Greek to the person who's asking, because they've never dealt with it ever before.
Sure.
Right? And so, like in the one this morning, good example, some of that was strictly county jurisdiction, 300 feet back from the Train River, but the rest of it is the towns. And so in that particular hybrid arrangement, we could rezone whether the town liked it or not, getting the first 300 feet, but after that, the town on the river has the hammer to say, no, we don't want that change farther than 300 feet, right? So it's a case of you need to get to the town, particularly where the town has veto authority in non-shoreland stuff. Really, you need to get in with the town first, and hopefully we can all talk enough to get it so it doesn't get slowed down too much.
Well, if they at least have the direction of, well, if you want to do this type of rezone, it needs to be a minimum of this number of acres. And at least get some kind of a recommendation to the county of what it would look like. Because when they come to the municipality, they don't know what the acreage is. They don't know very, very little on what the zoning districts are. And so it would be helpful in that respect, because I can ask them all day long, well, what zone are you in? Well, I don't know.
No, and they even with the districts itself, with the density development aspects, the lot sizes aren't all absolutely the same, but that's where you're creating lots, you're generally talking to a surveyor too. And a good thing is to let them define what you should ask for too, because they can look at it and look at floodplain, look at elevations. With all the stuff we now have on the website for topography and all that, and soils, the whole ball of wax, it's really a lot of information to figure it out once you make a move.
I feel like we've gotten off track.
Yeah, that's me.
Back to enforcement. What I'm hearing is that once Jason sends somebody a notice and doesn't get some compliance, that's when the town should be notified, or should the towns be notified for every violation?
And I think Stephanie stated that that starts to cause a problem. If we're asking, for notifications and them talking about it, that.
Yeah, if they're engaging in a sort of quasi judicial process where they're having a meeting or where they're making a determination what the township wants to do or not do, or support or not support, the person who's the subject of the violation letter or complaint, they would have rights and procedural protections. They would have to, in order for any further action to stand up.
So you're recommending Jason does not inform the township.
I'm recommending that if Jason does inform the townships and solicit information from the townships, that there be a standardized practice that would be uniformly adopted, that would give the individual proper notice and ability to participate fully in the hearing or meeting. And that there would be some verification of the procedural safeguards taking place. And I'm not sure that, well, we can't dictate that the towns enact this.
Right.
But those are the things that I would
What if,
need to see.
what if you just send an informational note to them without asking for any response?
That would,
Just-
that would be fine.
That might make, I was kind of leaning that, thinking that to it, and when we have some ongoing two or three months,
It's been 4 years in the making.
yeah, something like that.
Send them a ticket.
Some-
I want you guys to know.
Well, it's probably more than a ticket at that point, you know, but, because that's where you might be some,
As you said before, if they wanted to take care of those issues, they wouldn't have hired us to do that for them. So I think we have to just let us do our job, inform them when we can.
right, but I mean, at that might be a good point to, before we take the next step, to send the town that this is an ongoing violation for X period of time. We're in the process of proceeding to the next step. We'd notify you for further information and any help or any assistance you can provide, you know?
Don't even ask for
I
anything,
don't
just say,
think so, just this is FYI.
FYI, well, that's fine.
Okay, I'm wondering how much additional burden this puts on Jason, and I'm just wondering, it's like, you know, can the towns on a monthly basis, if they want to, it's like, is there anything you're pursuing, or is that gonna even cost you more time? It's like, I just don't know what escalates to this, that, you know,
Well-
when does he send a notice, when doesn't he send a notice?
it's just like these ongoing cases that they have.
They're not all like that.
No,
Well, then we're gonna have criteria.
Always gonna be some-
What triggers that?
Then again,
Because if I don't do it, you know what's gonna happen? Somebody's gonna say, why didn't you tell me about this violation?
And I just see this getting kind of impossible. I mean, because if you say,
I don't see it being a burden. We have to tell our townships what's going on. I mean, that's 17 other emails on each thing he's gotta do.
21, because there's shorelands, so yeah, no,
Well, yeah, that's another thing. Do we even tell them if it's a shoreline only violation? Because in theory, they have no jurisdiction over it. So you only tell them on things that are outside of the shoreline area.
I think that'd be a hard policy to write without it causing a lot of headaches.
How many violations are you dealing with?
Letters I send out is probably 200 a year.
I've done maybe 10
I think we
citations
do
a week, but
about
I've been.
10 citations per year.
Okay.
But it's, if, you know, again, this is where, what level of violation do you wanna be told about?
good point. We talked about this a long time ago. There's a lot of notices of violation and not very many actual enforcement actions.
Citations.
Right.
And so in other words, the vast majority of those find out that they're in violation and correct it, and it's done.
Do most of the 200, I mean, are the 190 actually correcting it?
Close. Yeah.
And there's a very small.
I mean, there's some that you gotta bug them a few times to get them to, the one letter doesn't work, and I've had people, oh yeah. Oh, I know you're serious now when you sent me the third letter. I threw the first two away. Oh, okay, that's nice, you know, so.
Maybe for specific, I mean, how many letters does he have to send?
But-
I mean, let's just,
Well, it's enough to get it done, right?
Yeah.
You send more than one, there's a possibility lost in the mail or who knows what, right?
But I think
If
that,
you mail a citation or you do that, return receipt, right?
No, you don't even have to do that.
Okay, I used to, but it's okay.
I think that
They don't
openness
sign.
makes his job harder, and to me, I think the first notice goes out, the second notice goes out with the final paragraph that says the next action will be a citation. And if you don't hear back within a certain amount of time, however you word the letters, then the third step is a citation. And when you are gonna issue a citation is when you tell the town. That's my recommendation.
I think you could end up with better results if town knew ahead and maybe they would respond quicker, like I said, to the people you know, and
Copy,
plus that takes him off having to keep bugging them too.
Right.
copy to town that maybe right before the citation.
And I don't
You could do it on the second
know, like you
citation.
said, some townships may not even
Right.
wanna participate, maybe you just do a little quick couple line contract with each township that says, we wanna know what's going on. And we'll sign for it saying we'll be responsible. And then all you gotta do is notify the clerk, it's up to her to notify the board.
But that's potentially 200 extra communications for Jason.
Well, if everything's signed done.
I know, I'm just trying to make this, it's like,
But then when there's a new election,
And then if you're not gonna do it, then why don't we just eliminate the town boards, because what are they doing? We're sitting there trying to do this comprehensive plan, and everyone keeps going, well, why bother? Cause they just overrun us on everything anyway, we don't even hear about what's going on till it's already done.
no, that's what I'm trying to get at is what, is there a way that it's like, are there any egregious, it's like maybe once a month, someone's calling Jason and say, is there anything egregious that we need to follow up on? I mean, because, if it's really minimal and it's probably at the top of his list, because just generating all this extra work, well,
No,
I'm not sure that's the answer, but I like the right,
Hope to help him rather than to give him more
Right.
work.
right.
And I
Would
honestly,
it eliminate extra work for Jason if there was just a letter that's sent out yearly to the town saying, hey, would you like to be notified when there's enforcement action in your township or not? Maybe half or 3/4 would say, no, we don't want to be notified, then he's off the hook on that altogether. And I agree with the comment about, board action, like when there's gonna be an actual citation too. I mean, we don't wanna inundate Jason with even more work, but at the same time, I think we gotta solve this problem. Even if it is only 2 or 3 townships, we've gotta solve that communication problem.
Why don't we, as far as, I'm not gonna solve this today anyway, why don't we send a letter to all the towns and just simply ask, are you interested in being notified if land use is a enforcement action initiated in your town?
or of any action that's going on in the town.
I'm
Well, we're gonna always get conditional use and rezoning ones anyway. That's automatic.
A lot of them say the houses are built before they go to get their driveway permit, and if you go up Soderbeck Road, there is driveways literally, there's probably that one stretch. I bet there's 7 or 8 within 100 yards. It says right in our comprehensive plan, driveways have to be 100 yards apart.
Right, but your comprehensive plan isn't enforceable. It's a guidance. It's what you request.
Means exactly what the comprehensive planning committee is going through now. They're saying, why are we wasting our time? Cause they don't.
Well,
And my guess would be that if I was in Jason's spot, which I'm not, I would look at my plan and say, okay, now this permit's in this town. I would glance at their plan just to say,
well, but the town,
80% on their survey said the people were for this, but we're gonna do the exact opposite? No, I wouldn't.
but the town needs to adopt an ordinance to do that. It's like, we've had towns that wanted to have a lower density, but they haven't rezoned to that lower density district yet, and they objected to a certified survey map because there are more lots than they run with, but the existing ordinance is what we have to enforce. The comp plan enables you to make those changes, but you have to, if it's a town level driveway permit, then the town needs to have an ordinance that requires that. The plan itself is why you justify it, but it isn't a regulation that you can literally enforce.
so he's basically saying you have to adopt a driveway ordinance. Do you have a driveway ordinance?
In our comprehensive plan from way back, I mean,
Your comprehensive plan isn't an ordinance though.
I'll have to ask someone who knows the ordinances, to, I guess I don't, we haven't got the ordinance, or we're not even done with the plan.
No, but all I'm saying is that if there was an ordinance in effect, that, and a 100-yard spacing is tricky sometimes because sometimes there's a wetland or a curve or some other reason where it needs to be modified, right? But the long story short is that the plan enables you to then adopt that ordinance because your citizens have all agreed that this is important and we want to do that. But you still have to do the ordinance that the plan recommends. Go ahead.
Based on that, the question I have as far as enforcement, Great Lake does have a driveway ordinance. When somebody comes with, requesting a land use permit to put in a septic system, and they don't have the driveway there yet, does the county say then you have to go to the town and get a driveway permit? Or do they just come and allow the septic system to be placed, or how does that work for enforcement?
We direct people to their townships for driveway. We tell them, you know, if you're on a town road, contact the town. If you're on a county road highway, contact the highway department. So we're telling people that, and that it's probably.
Overlooked usually even do that, because there was one on Sylvia that he built a house that didn't even have an easement to get to his place.
And it probably even says that in our land use permit application. I would almost say all the fine print that nobody reads, it probably says in there, contact your township. For access. I'd have to look.
I just didn't know if that was part of the enforcement piece.
Well, but we can't enforce a township ordinance. So if you have an ordinance that says your driveways must be spaced 100 feet apart, I, as the county, can't enforce that. The township has to enforce that.
But can you still give the
But
permit
you
for
can
the-
give them a building permit and they're already building before they even.
Well, I don't think I could hold up their permit for if it doesn't violate our ordinance.
Okay, so then how can we get to the point where we know that you're gonna give them the permit, so we can say, hey, you can't start building that till you have to.
Adopt township zoning,
Mhm.
then you take on everything, then you know everything that's going on. I guess that'd be the best way to do it. Some townships and other counties have done that.
Would be the UDC permit.
Well, the UDC gets copies on everything, but again, they don't probably care about driveways.
No, I
It's not
agree.
there.
I mean, the town should know there's a UDC permit in process.
But some things are exempt from needing UDC, I mean, new houses need them, but
That's new houses for new driveways, I'm thinking.
yeah.
And I think it may already be happening, but it's not being communicated, sounds like.
Communication can always be better between anyone.
No doubt.
All of that takes time though. So, I mean, the more we communicate, which is fine, but at some point. I'm gonna say, you know, at some point, we're gonna put so much stuff that we have to do, we gotta start cutting stuff.
And that's why I would be hesitant to even send a letter to the town saying, what do you want? Because we might not be able to accommodate that. I think we need just to brainstorm, you know, like, let's say there's a spreadsheet of violations that exists in Jason's office. And someone from the town can look at it to say, you know, this one, I don't even know, this is just throwing one thing out there, but I think we need to brainstorm on how it can be streamlined, so it's not overburdensome for Jason or for the town, and what is that, other than.
Yeah, no, I think Jason's point, we wanna put extra work on him, but when it comes to communicating, I wanna make sure we remember, we're not only talking about extra work for Jason and communication for Jason, but when these things happen and there's a lack of communication, there's a lot of communication that doesn't have to happen at the town level, Jason, that maybe could have been prevented too. So I mean, there's more to it than just what we see. So.
Yeah, there's more to it than what they see.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we're not in each other's shoes, so we don't see what each side's
And I
going.
agree, and I only mention it, and I haven't been in your crosshairs on that stuff, so, but I mention it because it has been an issue and it needs to be addressed. However we go about it is fine, but, we've gotta do something with it. So, and I think discussion's been good, a lot of good suggestions, and, you know, when we work together, it isn't just Duke's way or the highway, I mean, we gotta work together in these things, but there does need to be some more collaboration with our towns regarding enforcement on like salvage yard type stuff and those sort of things. I'm not talking shoreland stuff. I'm not talking septic and that kind of thing. But a little more communication would be good.
So on our land use permit in bold letters, town/UDC permits may be required from town/municipalities. Property owner is responsible for contacting their town for more information.
So it's literally the homeowner then that was screwed up, because he just skipped that part when we talked to the town.
That's how I think some of them forget to talk to the county too. Like, oh, I didn't know I needed a permit to build that house. I've had that
And some of
before.
these, like what he's talking about too, is people might have a piece of land and then get somebody out to shovel in the driveway before anything has been applied for.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, he stole land from two people because he bought a landlocked thing. And he built a house and he didn't even talk to no one until the damn house was done, everything. He says, well, you can't not let me go. I just sold it to him by the square inch and he'd airlifted it out of there.
I think it's tough too nowadays. It seems like everybody has a skid steer or knows somebody who has one. So it's like, oh yeah, my buddy did this, my buddy did that. You know, so it's no longer like you have the 5 or 10 companies that do excavation that can tell the homeowner, go, hey, stop, we gotta get this figured out. You know, now it's just everybody's, and you can rent all the equipment yourself and.
And then over out there, it's really sandy and easy to do, right? So
I mean, I see a guy on Highway 70 put in a driveway. I drove past it every day. It rained last week. It's all ponding with water, right? I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna let the highway department, I'm gonna see how long it takes for them to fix that. Sure enough, I drove by yesterday. It's dug out and has a culvert in it. So I'm guessing the guy just blasted a driveway out onto State Highway 70 with asking no one. And then they made him tear it out and put a culvert in and fill it back in. So I don't understand how to catch everything. I mean, it's impossible.
Does it help putting a little thing in the envelopes with their tax statement?
Yeah, I think I've heard people say, hey, I saw that, you know, so I know I need a permit for this. I did have one guy that said, oh, I need a permit for that. And I said, oh yeah, did you get that flyer that was in your tax bill? He's like, oh, I must not have looked at that. I got my tax bill, but I didn't look at the flyer. So again.
make them read it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can only give so much information, I guess. But yes, there has been people that it has gotten to.
Okay, well, I think we've probably beat this one long enough today. So let's move on.
I mean, do you, I guess, what guidance or what do you want me and or Stephanie to do on enforcement?
You know, after we've talked about this for all this time, I think maybe something in an ongoing egregious violation. And try to pull the towns in, but that, I don't think we can do more than that myself. So where you're about to take another step, notify them of the forthcoming action. That's the most I can think of we could do.
Would that be relatively few? I mean.
Well, if you're talking citations, then we do about 10,
Yeah.
12 a year.
Yeah,
But if you're talking 200 violated, so that's what I mean. I don't know.
no, I'm talking about,
What level are we talking about?
When it becomes critical, when you're ready to send a
I'm
citation.
talking about after you sent number of notices and you're about to either issue a citation or go summons and complaint. Contemplating that, that's the next step at that point.
Yep.
That would be the only way I can see to thin it to the manageable number within what we are capable of doing. Because it's not like we're running around looking for these things and trying to add more of them. When they come up and when they hit that point where nothing has happened and you're gonna take the next step after you're not gonna try to define how many notices you need to take before you think that's the case. Because that's gonna be case by case as well. So for now,
It seems like you're giving them more work, you're making them do it, sending them 2 or 3 notices. I'm saying you could probably get it down to, he'd only have to do it once, and then
well,
hopefully the town can fix it for him. So he wouldn't have to even get to that result.
true, but I mean, let's hope we can get to that point, work to that, but at the moment, that's where we're.
Well, right now, what I'm saying, hearing you say it is, you want them to send it the first 2 or 3 times and then call the
Well,
Well, now you've already tied them up for two extra ones that I think you maybe could eliminate right off the get-go.
True, but they aren't all like that. So it's gotta start somewhere, right?
I guess I'd like to ask Jason if you'd like more guidance on. I mean, do you feel like it's working, or do you want more specifics on how many notices they should be sent? Or, and I know there's going to be the special cases where this is a huge problem. We can't expect them to resolve it in 30 days because it took them 30 years to create the problem. But is there a way we can be more specific that would be more helpful?
I don't necessarily know. I mean, this is a job where, you know, I'm not gonna please everybody. So I know that there is no perfect solution to cover every scenario. Yeah, I don't know. How's that for an answer?
I think the earlier discussion that 2 notices, then enforcement makes some sort of sense, other than you know, using your common sense on the biggies that it's not realistic that they would comply.
Yeah, and there's been some, you know, where, and again, I guess I've had it where people only get 1 letter or 1 warning, or I've had it where they don't even get a warning because I've already dealt with them 3 times for the same issue on other properties. So it's like you can't say you didn't know the ordinance. There are a few of those in the county, that.
Or where they've been ticketed for the offense in the past and then didn't correct the problem and then comes back around.
So
I mean, it's not like there's every single one we, you know, do 2 letters and then do this step. So it is a case by case basis, but usually we're giving people multiple letters in every case right now. For the vast majority of them. So.
So, okay, well, let's leave it at that for now then.
I appreciate the discussion because it gives me more insight into what you're dealing with, because I, on a day.
Sit in my office for a couple days.
Job shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good
anyways,
question, Jason. When you issue a permit, does it go onto a computer or something?
Yeah, all the
So if
permits
we had
are,
our town clerk look into, is there a certain spot she could look and see how many you've issued, so she could tell us that. So we could get ahead of the guy who's gonna build the house before he comes to us for the driveways.
yeah, so there's a couple different ways to do it. If you had there's 2 different spots you can actually look for permits, because we have a database that we index everything in, and then we scan the electronic images of them. So if you go on our GIS website, like if you said, hey, my neighbor at 5485, does he have a permit for a garage? Go on our GIS website, click on his parcel, hit the little button that says permits, and it would pull up all the permits that the person has. Or you can go in our Ascent, which is our permitting program, like that. A municipality could search by, I want to see all the permits in the town of Grantsburg for the last year. They could put those criteria in there and it'd run a report of, here's all the permits that have been issued for that township.
Okay, well, that would be very helpful.
But again, then that takes your clerk though, that's another burden of them. Oh, okay, I gotta go through every month and, you know, do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go once a month and just get the plug.
Mm-hmm.
it's not that hard, I can do it. I'm pretty much a Luddite. But that's a good point, because once you did it, then you'd only be looking like in the last month.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, just and stay ahead, and hopefully, because yeah, if you don't know by them, you probably nowadays they can knock out a house. Done and gone before the.
Manufactured homes, they bring them in and, you know, yeah, a week or 2, it's done. Yeah.
We have a lot of that, you know, people bringing in a camper of some sort, not in the shoreland area, but a lot of that.
Where you can change the zoning in the whole county, or if they gotta pay some kind of taxes, because all the guys I know that work for these townships, the town guy. Says they get 300 calls a year, 299 of them are for people who don't even pay tax. Who own a camper sitting on a little 1 acre lot here, And all they need is more plowing and more rest. They need all they keep wanting all this stuff. He said, the people who lived here, I never heard from.
Well, some towns have tried that. And it's one of those things that the county can't do, but the town could do maybe.
Well, not tax a camper though.
Not tax a camper, but to charge them like a.
Some Hayward years ago, I used to haul out of there. I was talking to the guy who runs the border. He said they had to do something because everyone was doing that. They were leaving he said they started pouring heated slabs, skirting them, so that they left the axle in the tunnel. So they skirted all around that. So they didn't have to pay no tax.
The town of Bass Lake in Sawyer County, it's just on the west end of Hebron. I know they were trying to do it, and we've had towns look at it here too. But it's a real problem in that those things used to be taxed, those park model type ones. And then it was changed. They were.
That's something to do with axle in the front, but they were.
Yeah, well, it's a personal, well, we can spend some time on this separate, but it was a personal property change in the law. So because of what they weren't taxed anymore. I mean, I have, in my town, I have a Voyager Village subdivision that's non-shoreline camper friendly. And it's full of campers, and you see a lot with a small garage, a septic and a well and a park model, and it's assessed at $20,000. You know, and they demand the same service as a guy with a $200,000 house, right?
Well, they demand more according to the guys that were looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole separate problem that requires state level changes to the law to tax those things.
But some towns, I think, have looked into like a camper parking fee.
Infrastructure support fee, whatever you want to call it,
Like a
yeah.
You could do that at the township level for the ordinance.
It should ask the towns association attorneys about that, but towns have tried it, I think, or are thinking about it, at least. But
Would it be a benefit to the towns if at a future towns association meeting, there could be a demonstration as to what the towns could do to access this information from the county GIS and all of that, because not everybody's all that computer savvy, and if a demonstration / training could be provided,
Yeah, I can do that.
maybe that would be a benefit of the towns.
Maybe you could have like a class and how the towns would come here.
Or that, yeah,
They should
whatever,
go to every town.
whatever would work best for the towns.
Meet at every town meeting.
That's what he's suggesting. You go.
No, he's saying I go to the towns association meeting, which is their quarterly meeting that they have here.
In July, late July.
And then, yeah,
haven't you been?
no, going to, 21 township meetings.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Do it at that meeting. They're quarterly. Polk County and Burnett County have them on the same evening. They're usually 7 o'clock here at the Burnett County room. You're in there, and that'd be a great place to do that.
Hey. That would be helpful, I'm sure.
I think their next meeting is July 24th at 7 p.m. right here. It's in our county boardroom.
So I will reach out to the chair, because I think it's a new chair, Darwin.
It's not Darwin.
Yes. Yeah, so I'll reach out to Wayne. 'Cause I'm guessing he would then put it on the agenda or something. At that
Yeah.
meeting, yep. I can do that.
Okay. So we're now to land services reports.
The reports are in there, nothing really too exciting, permitting, revenues down a little bit, compared to last year, nothing to worry about though, but it, a little bit, slower. Permit numbers are in there. Quite a few, I'm surprised we're at 48 new dwellings already, so, yeah, there's still stuff going on. It's not like it's stopped or anything. I just wonder if maybe people a little nervous with tariffs maybe and interest rates, you know, some uncertainty if maybe a few people are sitting on the sideline or kind of waiting.
It seems
Yeah.
like people.
Home sales, I think, are even slowing down. It seems like a little bit. I've been seeing more stuff, so I think I've been hearing is on the market longer. Seen some price dropping a little bit. I kind of see when I'm looking at stuff. You used to never see, you know, reduced price on anything. Now you see a little bit of that stuff, you know, happening, so. Yeah.
Let's see, I see. Derek has applied to take his CST.
Yep, he passed his POUTS test, yep. So now he's on to applying for his CST, yep. Callie will be gone here shortly on maternity leave. Supposed to have a baby like the second week of July. So that'll be fun to be down a person, so
In the middle of summer.
in the middle of summer, yep. But we need more kids, right? So there you go. And Emily should be coming back from maternity leave here later on this month. She's
Having two kids born in December, I can understand why they would rather be gone in the summer.
yeah.
So, future agenda items? And our next, July 1st will be our next meeting.
So we'll have on there the review of the tax amendments again for July. And then I know there's some public hearings, but I don't remember how many or what they are. Wasn't a lot of them. Couple of them.
Normal piece, no.
Yep.
No standing room only contentious ones.
Nope, knock on wood. Hopefully not coming up, yep.
It's getting boring.
Oh, he ruined it.
Anyway, anything further? If nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make the motion to do it.
Motion to adjourn by Lee, second.
I'll second it.
Second. Everybody. There's a little bit of, Duke gets that one. He has to leave a lot of the time. So, no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
We adjourn.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Good day, dude.
Bye-bye.